All right, good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming to the 2018 State of the School Address. I am James Record, Dean of Chicago Medical School, and really excited to talk about this year, both past and forward. So a word about our theme today. And in looking at this and remembering over the past couple years our themes, right, going from beyond resilience to a place where we are stronger to resist even more stresses in the future, to last year talking about crystallizing our future and really understanding where we need to be going forward. I thought energizing connections to be an appropriate next step, because this is really about where we are in extending that future and what we will need and the energy to execute that vision. And so from a perspective of inspiration, you'll know that we published last year in the spring our inaugural issue of Synapses. And if you look a couple floors from here, you'll see that we have labs that are also talking about same items. And so you can imagine, for me, it's pretty easy to find in both art and science that inspiration for what we need to do going forward. But it ultimately involves more than just the neurons that we're talking about. It really is the connectivity within our environment, and that really is part of the theme going forward. But as we look at that theme, one of the things we have to consider is that it always runs through the lens of our mission. And so you know our mission, I'm sure, and like most, it is premised on this idea of a pursuit of excellence. But for this, I'd like you to look actually at the last word in our mission, and it's environment. And I think it's particularly appropriate as we go forward. And as part of our theme, one of the things we have to consider is that this really involves us and our energy within our environment to really enhance, to forge new and renew old relationships and connections. And so as I will talk about this over the course of these next hour or so, I want to do it through the lens of our strategic plan. And a word about that, our strategic plan, of course, is premised on the university plan and drawn up in such a way that we recognize the center of that plan still involves RFU and us as an essential cog in that machinery. But we're going to go through each of these elements one by one. What you see here is something that many of you have actually worked on. I consider it to be one of the most exciting slides, and people may laugh. Good, that's fine, That's not the least of which people have laughed at me for. But when we look, this is, that was a slide. This is a close-up of that top left corner. This is a slide that changes medical education that has existed for the last 100 years. I mean, it really is incredible when you consider how we are changing that in a very simple way in some ways, and in a very profound in others. And that is to say, when you look at the clinical foundations of medicine, that EMT course that we will start out with, it really is shifting that framework for students to learn on a scaffold that starts clinical from day one. And thereafter, in parallel with our basic science, which starts out here and is also nested in the rest of the curriculum, we have a systems-based approach with patient presentations as the fundamental aspect of how we integrate a curriculum. That is the approach the physician needs. And when you talk about energizing connections, I will tell you, having talked to clinicians and students, that definitely energizes them. And for us, I think it is really a way forward that goes beyond just that curricular diagram. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But when you consider a clinical curriculum, one of the things you have to know is that from an education standpoint, as well as a patient safety standpoint, you have to be very careful about how you introduce students into that environment. And what that tells you is that we have to have a simulation environment that also is robust in order to present those students appropriately in their environment and to safeguard those skills that years ago were practiced on patients. Now we know that there is a better way and that we have data to show that it matters. And so for us, it really is looking at simulation as a growing part of our curriculum forward. And in doing so, you'll remember if you were here last year, I presented this slide, and we talked about this wonderful proposal that was being built out at Huntley with our Syntegra partners, and it was 10,000 square feet, and it was replicating an entire hospital on one floor, all simulation, designed that you could run, in essence, a virtual hospital 24/7. It was a spectacular vision. Well, now it is reality, and it's up and running in Huntley. And when we consider the issue with our curriculum, one of the questions that gets asked is, well, what are we doing for the existing curriculum? And this is part of the benefits of that rethinking. And that is that existing students now are already enjoying the benefits of this place where we actually blend IP practice and education together to drive forward our educational mission. And as I said, it will become an increasingly important part of our curriculum going forward. And so if you haven't been out there, it is incredible. I mean, this is one of the most state-of-the-art simulation centers in the country, and we've got it here. And so when you look in the emergency room with its own ambulance, when you look at an OR that's almost indistinguishable from the OR around the corner at the hospital upon which it's attached, when you look at outpatient settings, quite frankly, that look better than the places I practiced for so long, it really is impressive. Moreover, it is also designed for simulation with both remote and direct access to support that educational mission. It is, again, a crucial component for us. We are so excited about how that invests our new curriculum and our new thinking going forward. But in order to do that, we had to also reimagine the support for that same structure. And so what we need to do is think about, in this integrated curriculum, which sounds wonderful, but is a tremendous challenge to start with when you consider we were all siloed in courses for the most part. Now we are integrating all of those together. It creates a different threshold for our communication and our integration. And so as we were looking at this, we were also mindful of another trend, and that is that even within research, we have to look at it in a more dynamic setting. And thankfully, a lot of our researchers were already doing that. And so looking at those isolated silos was something that we really needed to reimagine and invigorate. And so if you look down at this slide at the bottom left, 7 departments, you'll see that the 6 existing basic science departments, along with MEIH, that department that includes our faculty and course directors, is what we wanted to focus on. We had a premise, and if you recall what we did a couple years ago with our clinical science department, we took discrete clinical departments and we in effect nested them within a larger department as divisions and paired it with our education directors so that we had a structure that allowed for the educational foci as well as the faculty foci together in one department with an equal proportion of importance. And so here we are looking to do the same thing. This is something that has been approved and will be implemented now in July of this year. And so when you look at what I had talked about with that complexity, you have some sense now with this slide, which is mindfully busy, but for a purpose. And that is, with all of those blocks that you see that are now integrated courses, it requires a different level of communication. And this helps us get to that space. And for us, allows us to meld both the vertical in the threads, which run 1 through 4 in terms of their curricular implementation, as well as blocks and courses in their contiguous threads. So we have now this retitled MEIH to what is FSH, and for us, that forward purpose is looking at that academic framework. So certainly there should be one question that you're asking, because most of the basic science departments are premised on basic science as well as education. And so this is what I was getting at with regard to the curricular focus as being clinical. It's also a research focus. And so looking at translational researches, and if you looked at a lot of the research that was going on, even now the question sometimes exists is which department was it from? And so you had researchers who were already extending in between through departments. And so what we're doing here is really giving formality to that framework and allowing us to have a dynamic, clinically based focus going forward in a way that helps us organize around research, and yet at the same time provides that academic framework that exists with our current academic structure of those traditional departments that sits in the academic phase of this. So as we look going forward, there are a lot of accomplishments over the course of this past year. I can't do justice to all of them. I will apologize now for leaving plenty of amazing people out, so please forgive me. But when we talk about academic affairs and the Office of Student Affairs and Education, there's a number of continued success. When we look at our match rate, this is one of the many elements that people look at, and arguably one of the most important for students coming into a school. Our match rate continues to be fantastic, and that is premised upon some outstanding faculty and some outstanding students collaborating. But Student Affairs and Education is the one that really tries to marshal that together and has continued to do an amazing job. You have the leadership over to the left with Jeanette Morrison, Gordon Pullen, and Cheryl Giuliano, who've done a terrific job of invigorating that area and looking at some of those elements that are under the surface that you won't necessarily hear talked about too much over the course of a year, but play fundamental roles in how the student's experience is and how we connect with our partners, including residency directors. And something simple as a new dean's letter actually has tremendous impact for students to provide them with an appropriate reference that allows for their discussions, their interviews with residency directors in a more streamlined approach that can matter. When we look at some of the EPA portfolios or even this individualized plan for success, it's about framing the educational process in a way that connects individually with the students with the outcomes that the students will need going forward. So many amazing things happening there, as well as in our academic learning environment. And that, for those not aware, may not be clear on what that office really is, because it was the first in the country now, like almost 2 years ago, that when we started it. And the framework was that it was about the learning environment being inextricably linked to students, faculty, and staff. And so looking at those things beyond traditional student affairs, which was more curricularly linked for the most part, into those things that affect the entire learning environment, to make sure that we are looking at all those elements to support students, faculty, and staff. And with the publications, one of which you've already seen the cover, and looking at our expanded community, learning community programs, where we are more receptive, we are more engaged, and we are more supportive for our students going forward. These become essential components that, again, oftentimes fly under the radar, but I want to highlight today. We've had expanded presence both at national and international meetings because of this, and it really is a wonderful platform going forward. In addition, when one talks about curriculum, one of the things that you have to be aware is that for all the excitement of developing and implementing a new curriculum, before you train students, you have to train the trainers. And so looking at faculty development through the lens of I4C, with a number continuing to expand to support faculty in this new process. Clinical Science Department also has some wonderful successes, and it always brings my heart joy when I can find we have more clinical opportunity for students, and that's what we've been doing over this past year. Not only from the perspective of increased numbers of rotation, but looking at quality rotations and trying to expand that platform where we already have it. In addition, looking at relationships with longer lengths of support. We are very pleased to see that progressing nicely and are really excited about the future with some of our existing partners and the opportunities that look to be in our future. In addition, changing that connectivity into the student experience, this year looking at an elective in M3 is an important element, I think, in terms of building that flexibility for students to start connecting with their environment in a way that hopefully better foresees their future. And so creating that flexibility and that joint approach with the Office of Student Affairs and Education and our curriculum committee, I think, offers a wonderful opportunity as we build going forward. The other, of course, is, as I said, the expansion of simulation has already begun, and we're excited about that and how it's impacting existing students. When we look at our GME programs, we continue to have some wonderful programs, both right next door and out west. And for us, they continue to have some really exciting elements, including continued full accreditation with commendation, with no citations for all of our residencies and fellowship programs. And you have Dr. Zidane here as our designated institutional official overseeing all of that. One of the things that underlies fellowships in particular, but also residency programs, is research, and all types, but including clinical research. One of the very encouraging aspects of our FHCC relationship is that we continue to have even more research being done over at the FHCC, and that really helps enhance our rotations for the residents and fellows, really creates an academic environment that even our students can better participate in. And so seeing that really helps undergird our foundation in GME and is really wonderful. As far as our faculty, we have some well-recognized faculty. Dr. Gilden is just one, but really some spectacular leaders in their field who are helping to support us in our academic endeavors. I should say for Centegra, this is a nascent program. It's in its second year. It's actually interviewing for the third and final year of residency. And we'll look forward to a site visit to confirm how well things are going this summer. But it has been so well received by the faculty in a place that didn't have any residency programs, is really beginning in its academic framework. To have such a positive response is really exciting. And for us, it is not simply just about the faculty there who have been so supportive to the tune of, even before we've got our final approval, wanting to expand the program already. It is a terrific example of our connectivity and our relationships with great partners. But it's also about the leadership over at Centegra. And I will say that not only is this an excellent program, the leadership out at Centegra to support this program, to be honest, is really a model. And so I just want to highlight that for us, because when we look at our academic programs, we can hope to have a partner who is as engaged and thoughtful and supportive of our residents as we do at Centegra for such a new program. It is incredible, and I think it gives us great excitement going forward. So, and one point on our CME, we continue to offer that support for our faculty, and looking at, again, another area with full accreditation and commendation. We're very proud and looking forward to doing even more in the coming year. So this is a map of our clinical partnerships just for our core rotations. Unfortunately, with our elective rotations in the 4th year, it's a map of most of the United States and half of the hospitals, it seems, in the United States. So this really just addresses the 3rd year clerkships for the most part, but you can see how diversified we are. And this is something that is an important part, certainly, of a community-based medical school. But to be fair, this is one of the things that is highlighted even by residency program directors for our students' ability to have those experiences, to be adaptable, and to make sure that they can manage in a variety of environments. And so that provides also a wonderful array of opportunity for our students. And with burgeoning partnerships, we're excited about continuing that in the future. But I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about things beyond the local and talk about our global health network. And for us, it's been really exciting as we've gotten more involved in the global health area to recognize that for our students entering a system that we know needs a lot of help, it is important to recognize, not simply from a clinical aspect, but from a leadership aspect, that we have to make sure that we give those exposures to students to be able to see what other systems, now that's high resource countries and low resource countries, how they manage, because that's the information that we need them also to take back here to help us with our own issues going forward. And so as part of building that leadership group, we need to expand our global health experiences. And we're excited to have a number of different partners where we expanded this past year, most recently in Uganda and Lithuania. We are looking forward to more in the coming year, including Israel and others. But for now, what I will say is that that is something that we're excited about for the experience. It's also something that we are mindful of, looking at costs and trying to develop even more in the way of scholarship to support students where cost can be an issue. So we look at that as we do our general scholarship elements as something that we need to continue to invest in as we move through what is a global health environment that is premised upon greater exposure, but with a primary focus on ensuring safety as we go forward with new rotations. Now, there's no way a couple slides can do justice to the amount of community service, the thousands of people and hours that are done every year. And so I'm not going to try. This is a small sampling of what is done, but I do want to highlight one item that I am particularly excited about. The orientation day of service, I think, was, for me, one of the most exciting things that RFU has done and for which CMS I am so proud to be a part of. Because looking at students coming in, as they did last August, for their first day of orientation, and having that framework immediately be service to others, because that's what we're in. We're in a service industry, and our framework often in academics, getting up to medical school, is inward-facing for good reason. But that's where the problem is, too. And so for us to have that framework now as a premise, I think, is something that we need to continue going forward. That we have already students who do an amazing job in community service, faculty and staff who do the same. But having that as a philosophical touchstone, I think, is important for us. And I am so proud of the university for starting it, so happy that we are a part of it, and always, as always, amazed by the community and their response to us. And that includes not just some of the newer things that we've done, including the bottom picture here, which represents our veterans from the FHCC and the program that we've started there, that, to be honest, I had no idea how much that was going to explode into greater things. But that has to be one of the most enthusiastic groups we've worked with, who are so excited about participating in the support of medical education, that the community service actually, in some ways, which we started out looking at this as us going, I think has seen this as the community also serving CMS. So we're terribly grateful for their support, but also knowing that, as you see the top two pictures, Our ICC is just a fantastic support of the community that was initially student-driven and so fundamental, I think, to that approach that we are looking to engage with a clinical orientation in service right from the get-go. You know, and our Franklin Fellows, of course, are some of the real outstanding stars of the university going forth with a premise of supporting a community. So our community service is something we really should celebrate and be proud of. So from an interprofessionalism standpoint, we are excited, and with so many connections across the university, it's easy to enjoy on a daily basis. But I will say this past year brought us something a little atypical, and that is that nutrition, which perhaps you saw in one of those earlier slides, was now joining CMS. And for a lot of physicians, what you know is nutritional education in the course of medical school usually involves a couple lectures on hypovitaminosis and hypervitaminosis, and maybe something on an ADA diet, if you're lucky. When you practice and realize how important diet and nutrition is, it reveals a lot of the deficiencies of traditional medical education. So I am really excited that we have the nutrition department now supporting us with new faculty and a new curricular thread where we've got the support of that faculty going forward, and I think we'll be able to provide a really enhanced, more realistic view of what one needs going forward to talk with patients about nutrition. And so this, to me, is one of those small elements that doesn't get talked about too much. It's a powerful point that we have to make, I think, going forward as a crucial component within our curricular structure. And that happens with faculty who continue to increase in prominence across a local and national stage. So diversity and inclusion, you know, it's something that we value here, and if you look at our surveys across staff, students, and faculty, we enjoy a very receptive and inclusive environment. But it doesn't address, at this point yet, what we see in some of the underrepresented groups in medicine. And there are still some incredible disparities there. And so for us, we know that our focus is on making sure we have the most representative group that we can to support our educational mission and our training programs going forward. And to that end, one of the things that we want to do is enhance both our recruitment and, in some cases, our scholarship dollars. And so in this way, to try to level that playing field. And so for us, this is one of the foci that we have going forward to make sure that we can have that environment that really represents appropriately the constituency. So our academic partnerships, we enjoy some wonderful academic partnerships. You've heard, I'm sure, about DePaul and the long-standing research program that we've had, as well as our student pipeline program that shaves a year off the undergraduate experience to form a 7-year combined undergraduate and medical school experience. We are continuing to expand that relationship. However, our original agreement is now coming to a close, and we are in the midst of discussions about how we can extend that agreement. I think there's optimism on both sides that this has been very favorable and that we look to continue this. Beyond that, we'll have more over the course of this year to talk about. There's also the Lake Forest College collaboration, and I will want to point out for those who don't visit the research labs much in the summer, one of the things that you'll see is that it really is bursting with students, and it is a testament to the quality of our research faculty that despite the workload difficulty and trying to create this experience for a student, we have those faculty going above and beyond to receive students to promote this mission. So I personally would like to thank you for all that you do in support of that student mission, because that's, again, another item that goes under the radar but speaks to the quality of the people that we have at this institution. And certainly I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about our pre-matriculation program, our collaboration with CHAMPS, and making sure that we provide that support for students to make sure that those who may be disadvantaged have a way into medical school as they should. In addition, one of the exciting parts about our curriculum going forward is this relationship with our BMS program, and I have every reason to hope that this next year, where BMS is now expanding their curriculum beyond what is the medical school, to have medical school level courses taught by medical school level faculty different from the curriculum that we have, I think will enhance those students' entry for those who do choose to apply and get into the medical school. So a lot of exciting things on the horizon for our partners, and looking forward to talking more about that in the coming year. One of the biggest issues that's come up this year, and what I mean big, I mean 100,000 square foot of big, is our research park. And you've heard perhaps about that. It is really exciting. This is the view from the north side with the library and what used to be the faculty parking lot, which will start being torn up in, I think, less than 2 months, with an estimated completion date sometime in summer of 2019. You know, this is such an important part of our future. And as we talk about defining how we're moving forward in the curriculum, how we're moving forward in research goes hand in hand. You know, for us to be an appropriate medical school, we need to expand our research. And this is one step in that direction. But certainly having a wonderful building with state-of-the-art resources is important, but it's really about the people that we have in those positions supporting the research. And this is a shot of our leadership going into that new environment. We're so excited to have this new group focused on, I think, a different framework, but with some of the same energies that have made us leaders across the nation. It's also about the faculty. And for the years of hard work, it gets to the point where someone can actually have an NIH or a DoD award. I think, again, I just want to make sure we call out those folks to celebrate their achievement. So if you would, I would just appreciate a round of applause for Drs. Urban, Ray, and Dabrowska. Oh, and Dr. Bridges, Dr. Peterson, and Dr. Gasmori. Oh, wait, we're not done yet. So, and also Dr. Cho, Dr. West, Dr. Chang, Dr. Wolf. Okay. Years of hard work, and it's so gratifying to see their success recognized. But that's not all, right? Because we've got a lot of existing funding. That doesn't even talk about what we talked about last year, which is funding going forward. It doesn't talk about over 150 publications, more than $10 million in new funding. It also is something worth mentioning, I think, is this final point. As I will say, we will be hopefully finding a microbiology chair, and I can thank Ron Kaplan for his work in being the interim chair, but have a new person that we'll look forward to talking about later in this year. But one of the most important parts is we talk about a research park and the building that's going to house what our researchers is, to make sure we understand that we need to increase the number of our researchers. And for us, we celebrate the fact that, you know, we're above the AAMC benchmark in award per scientist. The big concern that we have is we're so small. And I think going forward, it's really heartening to see that the university plan approves of now hiring 10 new faculty over the next 5 years to support that research mission. I think it's an important step for us as we look to get a greater prominence both within Lake County with our partners that will be part of the research park, but also within academia and within the research community at large. So really critical point, I think, that we'll look forward to talking more about as we go forward. So now let's talk a little bit about finance and philanthropy. So one of the important parts is for us as a small place is to make sure we're stewarding our resources appropriately. And when you look at what we did in the bond refinancing last year was, in essence, recover $1.3 million that we can put into the mission. That really is a critical point. It was really an ideal time for us to do that, and it allows us to contemplate other projects as we go forward. One other item, we had a bond rating that we would have from a partner until last year. Last year, we went for our own, and in the first year of doing this, we got a BBB+ rating. In education, I would say that really is terrific. And for us, we also are mindful of some of our colleagues and friends at some of Illinois' state schools, and very appreciative that we don't have some of the same problems that they've endured. And so for us, this is a wonderful starting point. Looking forward to seeing that continue to climb as we have greater stability going forward. And part of that stability is premised upon our different structures in looking at our ventures. And whether it is what is on the left at Syntegra as our simulation center or the research park itself, we are looking at external partners and engaging them so that we have more revenue streams to support the mission. I think looking at some of the faculty company developments and enhancing those to support our faculty, but also give greater benefit to our institution, are some of the ways we are looking to really enhance how we're managing our resources. But it is amazing when we talk about our resources, when you bring up the subject of alumni in particular. You know, I knew that we had some amazing alumni, and when you look at some of the leaders in the field, they are we. But when you visit and talk with them individually, the passion that comes out is amazing. What has been terrific, especially over this past year, is working with institutional advancement and seeing the response from those same alumni who are now more energized. And when you look at the statistics about them donating both on leadership level gifts, higher level gifts, and those that continue to give year after year, what you see is that base is starting to really become more engaged. And I'm really excited about this because I think what that represents, and as I've told them, is making sure that we have a place that they are so proud to call their own and to support going forward. For the students in the crowd, what I will say is that I hope you remember this someday, years from now, hopefully not too many, when you are feeling a little bit more comfortable about the status of your loans being gone, and you recognize that the reason we have been so able to give you that support and scholarship is in large part due to some very caring alumni. They are amazing. And so we couldn't do this without them. And so I just hope going forward that you understand that that's part of that mission. And for us, it really is an exciting time as we go forward, seeing the alumni engage so much in your success as students and in the institution's success in general. And when I say increase in support, I did look at this number twice, just to, actually it may have been 3 times, just to be sure, but we have increased scholarship support 54%. Now that's in an environment where external scholarships outside our institution has dropped. And in doing so, I am so excited about how we've made inroads into reducing student debt. It is a critical point that we have to address. Historically, we've been in trouble in that way, and I am so excited for us now to really be moving in a different direction. But this is a shared responsibility. And the reason there's a savings in this title is because of the second part here. It is incredible what the students have done. Now, I will give a shout out to Marianne DeCare and her team in financial aid about helping support these programs and doing an amazing job. But when you consider how much the students have saved, it is astonishing, $4 million. And how do we do that? We do that by having line items where students don't necessarily borrow for everything. for refunding where they can actually pay back those loans right away because they haven't used it, monthly allocations to help them better handle monthly expenses without incurring more debt, and then looking at the thrifty budgeting to keep a balance on what an appropriate target is. We know that with our resources, we look at this as a shared responsibility between administration and students, and going forward, I am so impressed with the students who have really understood that issue and addressed it so spectacularly, so quickly. However, when you look at this, you'll see, and for the math majors, you'll notice here the difference isn't 54%, and that's because this contemplates our internal scholarship increases, and this graph, unfortunately, looks at something that's closer to 33% because of the reduction in external scholarships. But having said that, even with that fantastic increase, we are still not where we need to be. We're making gains, there's no doubt, but we are still below the national average for private schools. However, we are closing. And when you look at the last few years where there have been rates between 3 and 5%, I was a little more excited about this, but apparently other people are figuring it out too. And the national rate only went up 1%, so good for everybody nationally, but for us, we went down 4%, which I will tell you in this environment is not easy to do. But we're very excited about this and the rate at which we are lowering those students. Now, we are stemming a tide that continues to grow with greater expenses going forward, so I will be surprised if we can keep that pace up. There's a reason why the national average is over 3%. But that said, when you look at the comparison of students who have debts over $200,000, what you see is we made remarkable progress. And now the national average is, unfortunately, over $200,000 as well. So we're seeing this collapse of the gap between us. And that is still, for CMS, who had one of the highest tuitions years ago, we've now actually lowered that ranking so that we are being very careful about how we raise tuition with the obvious impact to our students. So we're really excited about where things are going there, and how we're doing it, for the most part, is pretty simple. It's really about investing more in the people. And when you look at what we've been able to do in reducing some of our expenses on our non-capital equipment, service goods, and the like that would make up our operating expenses, we're making good progress. So in looking at that, I wanted to show this slide in terms of our sustainability. For those who know the finances, we had undergone a tuition freeze for several years to get us closer in line, and that was knowingly a temporary feature because one can't freeze tuition forever. However, what you'll see is it really played a role in lowering the revenue for us here, and the great news is we were able to manage pretty effectively. What we now know is as we exit that in a strategy that will look to now review expenses and revenue according to scholarship so that we are continuing to pay attention to student debt, we look to see that revenue curve rising. In addition, we also look down below at the expense curve, and this y-axis is the percent increase year over year. And so when you look, it's not really a surprise that you would see a lot more expense. In part, this is some overlap year to year, but we've had increasing expenses over the past few years. Why? Well, because we were preparing for the curriculum. And if you do this, you're going to need to spend several $million in support of that curriculum going forward early to create that development nidus that you need to eventually deliver. And then once you deliver, things tend to normalize, and that's what we're seeing here. So the great news is we've been able to look at the revenue, manage what was a low revenue time as we look to expand that up, knowing that we've also had a number of efficiency gains in our expenses that really can level this out. So it will still be something we have to pay very close attention to, and unfortunately every dollar that goes out I'd rather see towards student scholarship. So we are trying as best we can to cut that down so we can know that we can reconcile that student debt as fast as possible. But I will say it looks for us to be a sustainable future that looks increasingly bright as we go forward. So in looking at that, I will say there's a lot going on, and for us, the excitement phase is really just beginning. When you consider all that we're doing, the future of CMS, when we look back at this time, these will be the halcyon days of CMS, I think. And I am so excited to be able to share that with you, and I will say thank you so much for indulging me over this time.